everybody. Welcome to another edition of Louder with Ace. I'm joined today, as always, by my co-host Sean.
Hello.
So over the years, anybody who's been watching the show for a while, they know I'm a big horror movie fan. And in the early days of my enjoyment of horror, some of the ones that first really manifested themselves to me were the Universal monster films. I mean, they set the template for so much that followed after them, whether it's The Mummy or The Phantom of the Opera or Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, or The Wolfman. And there was a couple of gentlemen, a father and son, who were very, very instrumental in the creation of those films, and that was Lon Chaney and Lon Chaney Jr. Joining us on the show today, I have the great grandson of Lon, who is Ron Chaney, joining us from his home in California. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I look forward to our interview, and hello to everybody that's going to see the podcast.
So that's quite a family you come from. I mean, you literally have a great granddad who made one of the most iconic roles in the history of horror films in The Phantom of the Opera and even The Hunchback of Notre Dame, but probably more famous for his incredible makeup talents. I mean, the man of 1,000 faces, right? The guy was an innovator beyond anything. This was before we had your wizards of effects and things like that. And did you ever get any insight from any of your family about how he kind of got into that?
Well, yes, I remember Gramps telling us, excuse me, I remember my grandfather telling us stories about his father preparing for some of the roles as he remembered, because he often worked him out at home. He felt, studio time was that, and everything else was preparation for that to be ready. So he would talk about different characters like that. But more so, I think in my research, I've, discovered a lot more about the deafness in the family. And I think Lon Chaney Sr.'s roots go back to that early childhood and upbringing with deaf parents. So his whole being of associating and communicating with his parents was via sign language. There was no language. It was all expression and pantomime. And of course, they learned sign. His grandparents were teachers and educators, and a lot of his family was as well. And we're going back into the 1850s now. So it was at a very unique time that his grandparents started schools for the deaf, but it passed down to his mother and father, and that was his form of communication. So when he discovered acting, it was an opportunity for him. He was mesmerized by the transition of actors that would be one actor one night and then transition to somebody totally different the next night. And he was a prop boy. He just loved the stage. He said when he first saw it, he fell in love with it. And that deafness in the family allowed him to express so much. Primarily he was a comedian, and a lot of people don't know that. And he really got by on his dancing and his comedic skills, and he was an amazing actor. But in that early career, he started developing makeup, even before that with his mother, when he used to dress up for her and pantomime little roles for her about the town. He was born in Colorado Springs. She became ill at he was like 10 years old, I believe, somewhere around in that area. He had to drop out of school to take care of his mother for about a year and a half, because she was totally bedridden, couldn't speak, couldn't use her hands anymore. And that was his early auditions, I guess, because he would become the little newspaper for her and act out things and dress up, and he loved to sketch, so to keep her entertained. So I think that was his early roots to led to eventually the silent films, where he was so expressive. It was the perfect medium for him.
Wow. And then his son, your granddad, kind of took up the mantle and has a formidable list of films and television under his belt. And focusing specifically on the Universal stuff, I don't know if there's a Universal monster that he didn't play at some point. I mean, most famous for his roles in Wolfman and things like that, but he played Frankenstein, Dracula, on and on and on. It was amazing. So, but you actually knew him and spent time with him when you were younger.
Yes, yes. I was 17 when he passed away. So I knew him, throughout our whole life. We even lived with him for a while. I was too young to remember, but Mom told me, yeah, we lived with Gramps for a while, and he loved children and he loved all of us. So that was really cool. And so we would visit him throughout our entire life, so each time we'd visit, we would be getting older, but every time was really a unique experience. And similar to his father, I think he's so well known for being able to express emotion. And I think a lot of people forget that, of course, he was raised in sign language and watched his father and his grandparents, his grandfather, lived with them for a while, who was deaf. And even when he was a child and Lon was traveling with his wife, my great grandmother, he would be sent to Colorado Springs to stay with them sometimes when they would go on tour. And he said each time I would stay with my grandparents, I would learn a new sign or expression. So he had it throughout his life. And I think it reflected certainly of Mice and Men in so many of his different roles. But as far as all the monsters, yeah, we're pretty proud of that. We pretty much cover the gamut of all the monsters, other than the creature. So
Right. Exactly. So
we're pretty well covered.
In anticipation of talking to you today, I watched one of the new restored editions of the Wolfman yesterday. And the one thing that really struck me was your granddad was a tall man. Like he clocked
Yes,
in
he
what,
was.
6'2", 6'3", something like that. He always
Yeah,
towered
at his
over
height, at his height, he was 6'3". He was a big man. I always remember him being, of course, I was really young, He was an imposing type of figure. I mean, not to me, I loved him. So I wasn't, intimidated by that, but he was a big man. I just remember that, and my father wasn't that tall, but my brother is, he was the same height. So I think he kind of got that side. But the height side probably came from the Creighton side of the family. Lon's first wife, my great grandmother, Cleva, her father was tall because Lon himself was 5'10". And then, Lon Jr., Gramps. If I say Gramps, sorry, this is just
That's
how I
good.
refer
That's
to him.
good.
He was 6'3", yeah, at his peak.
Now you kind of continued with the family legacy by you've been in a Wolfman film as well back in 2009. How did
Yeah, that was an interesting episode of my life, It's my friend, and of course Sean was participated on that project, and
Yeah, that's where we met.
My friend Evan called me and he said, I wrote a script, and I said, yeah, okay, yeah, that's cool. And he goes, and he had actually approached me once before because he wanted to put my son in another movie. And I said, well, send it to me. I don't know if he wants to do it. He's really young. He needs like a 10-year-old boy or something like that. And I read this script, and it was a little too bloody. I didn't want him to be involved in that. There was a lot of killing going on. So I just said, respectfully, nah, he's too young for something like that. So then later he came and he said, I got this Wolfman project. I said, you sure? I don't have a lot of acting experience, love to do it. I've done a little bit, but, it's limited. And he goes, can't be a Wolfman film without a Chaney in it. So I said, you
awesome.
got it. If there's going to be one I got to do, I guess I got to do this one. He told me right off the get go, it's going to be black and white. It's going to be old style, and all that stuff thrilled me. And I thought, what do I have to lose? You only have to gain or have fun. And I'm always willing to try something new. And I love art. And I like people to reach their goals, or when you get something on your mind, you so badly want to do it, you almost sell your soul to get it done, sometimes. But I saw that passion with him, and I usually attract people with passion because I think I have a lot of passion for what I do. I was a contractor most of my life, and then I had this great opportunity to go represent my family and something I kind of always wanted to pursue. So when that opportunity came, I I took it, and I've just had to learn so much, and I'm so grateful because I've had so many amazing things happen to me, just by trying new things.
I've not
Enjoy
actually
that.
seen the film. Was it fun to do?
It was fun to do. It was a very quick shoot. I will say
Very
that.
quick. It was like what,
Uh,
2 weeks?
yeah, Sean, you can speak a little bit about it.
Yeah, it was about 2 weeks, right? And we had Anthony Tremblay. I think that's how you pronounce his last name. He
Yes.
did a lot of the sets and everything, and he worked on Evil Dead, or Army of Darkness, right? I believe he
Cool.
did those sets. Yeah,
Yeah,
but
he
that
was
was
really good.
yeah,
Really
and it was
good. Those
quick.
sets were amazing that he built out. It was pretty incredible. I
Yeah,
thought, I've been asked a few other times to do films. Yeah, because I always kind of wanted to. And then every time it would come to it, they either couldn't get the money, it wouldn't happen. I'm like, okay. So I learned a lot in the business. There's a lot of highs and lows. You get all excited and then it kind of deflates. So I guess I'm old enough now. It doesn't affect me as much. You got to stay a little more even keeled. But yeah, that movie was a lot of fun.
yeah.
It was hard on me, I have to say, because I was so nervous. I don't think I slept for 2 weeks prior to that movie. And really, because I'd never done it, I'm like, well, shoot, I thought I had my lines down pretty good. We changed a little bit. And the fun thing is, my good friend of mine, Dan Roebuck, who's an actor, I said, Dan, I don't have very much experience. Think you can help me out? Maybe give me a couple of tips, and he needed some contracting work done. So I said, you know what, I'll barter a little bit, and if you can help me out here. And thank God Dan did. But the crew was really patient with me. It was so much fun. I mean, I was on a high, but you're kind of stressed at the same time. And without a lot of experience, I think it came out pretty good. I wish I had a little more experience. And I told Evan afterwards, I said, we should do a sequel, Evan, because, I think it could still be done. And as long as we're here, I said, I have a few ideas for where it could go from there. And he just kind of, at that time, he was going through some tough times. So he just wasn't interested. So who knows? Maybe we'll revisit that one again. But it's really hard to find, Ace. It's
Yeah.
a hard movie to find.
Yeah.
And I think somebody bootlegged it at one time, but I did really well. I know the distributor of it, he told me, because I used to order some when I'd go to shows, I'd just have it. I didn't think too much about it. Well, they made, I think, only 1,000 of them in the first run. He said it sold out immediately. Then they made another run of 1,000 and it sold out immediately. And then that was it. I believe that was the end of it. And that's all the originals that originally came out. So
Yeah,
I don't know what happened after that or why they didn't keep it going, but whatever it was a lot of fun. I think everybody had fun. I hope they enjoyed it. It's still work. I think we all know that in the bit. It's work. But when you have a lot of joy on that, and everybody, like I said, was really good with me. They treated me and put up with a lot.
Marvelous.
But I did my best. I will have to say I gave it all I had at that point. I think I've learned so much from then, but it was an enjoyable experience.
Did you have
Yeah, I
something?
think I have a copy of it on DVD. It just says Ron Chaney Wolfman scribbled on it somewhere in my collection.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, we used to watch it every Halloween as a tradition, me and Denise, my wife.
Oh, that's awesome.
And
I think I have a couple copies I hung on to, because I know I asked Evan one day, I said, Evan, do you have any more copies? I don't have anything. I don't have anything. I mean, he has like the original man, but not the finished product in a DVD release. So
yeah,
I held on to one of them for him. So one of these days I'll remember it. And when I see him, I give it to him.
I heard it's really a hot commodity in Japan. Like people seek it out there big time.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah,
Oh,
that's what I heard.
well, it was a lot of fun. I wanted to do the stunts. Evan wouldn't let me. I said, I'll sign a release. Let me do it. I'll do it. And he said, no. He said, no, we can't have that. I go, just do it on the last day. And if I get hurt, then, nothing lost. Have your backup guy that you were planning to do it. So he wouldn't let me. I said, that sounds like a lot of fun. You know, that was, I mean, because they
Well, I
had
remember
water. They brought in a,
yeah, the stunt
you
guy.
guys bring in a stunt
Yeah.
man to do that.
Yeah, he I forget his name, but he was a stunt guy at Knott's Berry Farm. He worked
Yes.
yeah, that's from what I understood. He did stunts there, and I think he worked at the Halloween thing they have every year. But
Yes.
yeah, I remember I think he got hurt a little bit. I know he tried to crash through a wall that didn't break or something. They didn't score it right. And but yeah, he was a tough.
I heard that. I heard he broke his ankle or something on doing the scenes. And I went
Yeah.
back to Evan. I said, Evan, I told you should have let me do it.
Well,
Uh,
you've continued on the tradition of your family through the creation of Chaney Entertainment Incorporated. You still are working with all that stuff. I had one of the things we talk about on this show a lot is you know, the rights and permissions to various things. And I know that Universal is notorious for being very difficult to work with, especially when licensing things in their Universal Monsters universe. How is that affected with what you do and the relationship with Universal? Because I know you do put out products based on your granddad and great granddad's famous characters.
It's an interesting relationship, to say the least. Yes, we have the rights to his likeness, to his voice, to his silhouette, to his poses. Those are all come in kind of trademark type likenesses that we registered, you know, way back in the 80s, you know, because we had the rights pass on through my grandmother to us. So we've had that. And then I worked with my attorney to, you know, make a splash when I first started the company. And he said he had worked with the Ritchie Valens estate. And he said, we did a stamp campaign and it was very successful, you know, got a lot of exposure. And I went, oh, that's perfect. I want to do that. Let's do it for both Lon Sr. and Lon Jr. You know, I want them to go in together and that would be awesome. So that's kind of how that started. But once it all went through and later they did release a stamp. It was on Stars of the Silent Screen in like 1992 or 94, I can't recall. But they didn't have Lon Jr. So, and it was just Lon Sr. along with Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton and the old silent screen stars. So I met the Lugosi and card office, Bela and Sarah, at a show in, you know, in 93, I believe it was. And we all ended up living in California, not too far from each other. And I said, you know, I passed had a stamp campaign. Would you guys like to go in on one? We'll group them all together and we'll repetition and we'll get the characters. And that kind of started that way. So it ended up, we had tremendous support, had tens of thousands of signatures that we gathered, and the Postal Service decided to do it. And then as soon as that all happened, Universal came in and said, hey, well, these are our monsters, you know. And it's like, oh, we'll run the campaign. You know, they were probably best equipped to do it, obviously. It was, you know, for licensing purposes. But that was probably where our relationship started, because we started the campaign. They couldn't, part of our petitions were for putting their likeness on there. You have to have the real thing, you know, no genericized type of thing. And their name had to be on, because they didn't want to put their pictures on it. So the compromise was, if you have a sheet of stamps, up in the top pane of it, there's pictures of all the actors and their names, and then their names actually appear on the stamp, Lon Chaney Jr. as the Wolfman. So what that did was end up Universal came to us and offered to work with us in licensing. And that's kind of how it started. And at that time, with the stamps coming out, it was very popular. You know, and they were really big. A lot of people loved them. It had another resurgence because of it. And then a lot of licensing opportunities started coming along. And I think the difference, I don't want to say anything bad about Universal, because we work with them, you know, and I just don't understand sometimes why they not want to use the classics. They're the classics, you know, and which means Boris Karloff as Frankenstein, or Lon Chaney as the Phantom, or Lon Chaney Jr. So what they've done is they have a secondary program, which is their claim to copyright is they own the character.
Right.
So they developed a generic looking character. You know, the copyright laws are really weird anyway, you know. So you modify it a little bit, and at a certain point in percentage, it's not supposed to be that actor anymore. So that's always been our issue. They do have a secondary, but if people and licensees want to use the real deal, you know, the real Chaney likeness as the Phantom of the Opera, the Hunchback, or the Wolfman, or my grandfather's Frankenstein mummy, or, you know, Dracula, they have to get our permission. So it's kind of a, you know, it's just better to work with people. That's how I always look at it, because the fans love it, and let them choose. Do you want the generic looking one and the fun stuff that goes quick and novelty, or do you want classic looking one that might be a collector's item or just cool to have because it's an original?
Well, you know, there's been some stuff in the press recently that could affect the future of exactly what you were talking about, because you own the look of your granddad and your great granddad and all that sort of thing. So like last week it was announced that James Earl Jones, who's now in his 80s, has made a deal with Lucasfilms where he's sold them the rights to his voice. And there's a company that is going to, in future, if they ever want to use that classic Darth Vader sound, that they will generate it through computer stuff. You can see very easily that the next step is going to be, and especially because it's happening already. I mean, you look at one of the more recent Star Wars films, they had Peter Cushing, who played his classic character, and they reproduced him entirely digitally for the role. And also they did that with Carrie Fisher in one of the films. It seems like it's going to become a thing in the future where if you wanted some of these classic actors like your great granddad and your granddad to be in a film, that they could be in a film again through these services and the computer technology. How do you feel about that? And is that something you've ever considered so far?
I have. I've seen this developing for quite some time, and my original attorney, unfortunately, he's passed away, Jerry Weinstein. He was one of the originators. He helped me with all my rights issues in the very beginning. He was recommended by Chris Costello. So, you know, she had already been having that battle along. But I guess even going back before that was Bela Lugosi Jr. that first sued Universal for his father's Dracula likeness. So it goes way back. But as far as that issue, I think it's kind of cool. Yeah, they would need to get permission to use it. I mean, I'm working on a graphic novel right now that they want to use my grandfather's image as one of some character in it, not, you know, maybe his real likeness, not a character per se. Absolutely, I'm excited by that opportunity. But Jerry wrote in the very beginning about this was coming, and this was in either early 90s. So he wrote about this 30 years ago when digital was really first starting to come into play and to see celebrities. And then, of course, they did, it was Fred Astaire, wasn't it? That did a commercial dancing.
That's right.
And they did Natalie Cole and Nat King Cole. Remember, they did, I mean, that stuff's cool. To me, that's creative when they start mixing and using that opportunity to not only honor the ones that made it, because it does, but to do something cool and convert it into something new that's just as entertaining, or people enjoy seeing that combination that can be done digitally in no other way.
Yeah, it'd be nice to see London After Midnight that be recreated. That would be really cool.
Yep.
I mean,
I got a lot on London After Midnight, that's for sure.
with the considerable you know, amount of films that both Lon Chaney and Lon Chaney Jr. did, they would have ample material to sample their voices and build a lexicon that you could actually see and hear the actors as they were in their prime, which I think would be a fascinating thing to be. You know, could you imagine seeing a redo of the Wolfman starring your grandfather, but with modern special effects. Wouldn't that be cool?
It really would be something else. I mean, I look forward to that, and you never know where it can go. If you can imagine it, I believe you can do it. If you have the persistence to stay at something, and luck is in your favor, I guess, to pursue those type of things. It doesn't always work out, but I think it's a very interesting field. I think more of the newer actors would be worried about it, more so. Like, hey, we don't got to pay this guy the same amount that we have to pay you now. I mean, you think about the economics of it, but then again, there's so many creative artists out there now. You don't want to miss those acts either, I think, these days. I mean, there's been a lot of artists out there. So with this, it gives something for everybody and very unique.
Right.
Yeah, I just think it's something that we will be experiencing in our lifetimes here, that we're going to start seeing more and more of that. In my preparation for talking to you today, I stumbled upon something which I didn't know. And of course, we're primarily a music show, and I know that you're a big music fan. We've had those discussions previously, but you actually did or were involved in a musical about your great granddad called Man of a Thousand Faces, the musical. Tell me about that. How did that all come together?
That's a whole interesting story too, but it probably started about 8 years ago. And I was in New York actually trying to do a remake of London After Midnight. I had rewritten the script, and I was up in New York, and this gentleman called the office here in the California. My daughter relayed it to me, and so we talked briefly. He said, hey, I'm a director. I'm an associate director. I do Beauty and the Beast and Elf. And, I think there's a really interesting opportunity to do a musical on Lon Chaney. And I said, wow, I've thought about stage before, but I always kind of thought of it more as a drama. And I said, a musical. And just previous to that, and over the many years I've studied my family's history, Lon Chaney's early life was all music. They were musical comedies, light operas. That's what he did for the first 11 years of his life. That's what he did. And people don't know that about him, and that he was on stage for 11 years, probably near 1,000 appearances on stage. That music, I said, I wouldn't have thought so before, but since that's what they did, I can see that working on a stage musically. And then when he goes to film, they always did most of them on just sound stages there. So it really kind of made sense that Act 1 and Act 2 might work. And I said, yeah, let's talk about it some more. He was heading off to London or somewhere. So those were the early stages. And then I flew back to New York, and he got a gentleman to write, Eric, and a composer and lyricist. And we began. I told him the story. They asked me questions, and the writer would kind of do his thing. And it was really interesting to learn about how you develop a play and a musical for me, because it was all really new. But I knew the story is there, and I think the story has always been there in any format. It'll work tremendously. But nonetheless, in this case, we just went back and forth. He would ask me questions. I would respond. I would send him my research material to back up all of what I'm talking about. Like, you don't need to make new stuff up, okay? This is pretty dramatic, tale as it is. And then he would write things, and then he would suggest, okay, this is where a song would be due to be done. Okay, so he'd write it, and he'd come up with basically a tag for the lyricists and composers start working on the musical side, which I thought, well, that's pretty cool. And then they were doing their things, working on that side. And then we progressed the story, and we just went back and forth to develop it. And I'd send him all the information. If it came back incorrect, I'd say, no, this didn't happen. This is the way it went down. How about you do something like this? Or what about this? Because I'm pretty creative. I think the more I've done this, I realize I have more of that in me than I realized. So we just kept working on it over years. We did a couple stage readings in New York. So I would fly back and forth and watch the development side of it. We had different actors coming in. I thought they were wonderful, but we couldn't do anything just in a stage setting, in a reading where people would stand up, sing their part or say their lines or whatever it was. We have to get it on a stage. So eventually we had somebody bite on our, on the play, and we just debuted it last April in Michigan and at the Encore Theater. And just, we needed to test it out, see where we're failing, what we need to work on, what was working, what wasn't. I think it came out very well. Unfortunately, we got hit with COVID, so it shut the whole first week down. And they came back the second week and had great shows, and everybody loved it. So we're kind of in a in between right now on it. We're developing a video to pitch to different theaters, and it's a very emotional story. I think, people, we didn't go for all the glamour and everything. It was more about life and hardships that they went through, and him overcoming all these obstacles within his lifetime to become this silent film legend, this makeup artist that's never been seen again. He's copied, but he was a one of a kind, and of course of the era that keeps it where it is. No one will probably ever do something like he did, but it all worked. And musically, I'm hearing all these really cool songs and new music. I don't know how, just watching it develop like that, it just gave me a deeper appreciation for music and musicians and what they go through, and how it all comes together. And hopefully we have a bright future, but we're looking forward for another theater to pick us up and maybe do a longer run next time. We only did 2 weeks this time, and one got wiped out. So we're hoping for, probably 4 to 6 weeks, and maybe do a couple of different theaters. So we're discussing all that. We do have a producer on board. He's been backing us, and we're hoping for the best of it, because I think it's a wonderful story. I think people would love it. It's different. It's not your everyday type of stage play, and it's not a Disney musical. It's about life and one of a kind artists.
Sounds like a wonderful collaboration. I hope I get to see it one day. Do you have any plans to maybe film one or two of the performances for like a DVD release at some point?
It's in our agreement to do so. So, if it ever gets to that, and I think if we polish it so well, our lead, not all of our actors did, very small crew, small theater, and it reminded me of probably what Lon used to do, because he'd do like 4 or 5 different roles to make these things happen on a nightly basis. He was choreographer, he was an actor, he was he did it all. He was he'd be doing props, he'd be he just did it all. And what was incredible is our actors were doing it because they had to kind of, as they finished their thing, take off parts, props and things, and come back in and run down some stairs, change and they did a wonderful job. And our lead, Danny Gardner, was incredible. He went there and did some things that I was wondering if he would do, and he did. And I think he moved a lot of people, and he's an amazing talent.
Any plans to release a soundtrack album of it?
I think when we get to that final stage, I think all options are open. We need to get it out there. I think that's the thing. And I just hope another theater takes a chance on us. And we did film it. We got some of the B-roll from it. So we'd have this is part of the video pitch, so people can see, hey, look, they've performed it. It's been up on stage. Here's some of the music, hey, this looks like a good opportunity. Plus we have, a backer as well. So, all the things are there. I think for 2023, not being of the stage world, my partner said, they're already booked for next year's season. So we're really looking at 2024. So hopefully that'll debut at that time on a larger scale and a longer run.
That's awesome. I look forward to it. So when it comes to horror films in general, you can never say enough about the impact that the soundtrack has on the film itself. So many brilliant films were made classic by the soundtracks. Think about things like Psycho. Would Psycho be the same without that violin sound of, that everybody just associates with that film now? But but you know, one of your great granddad's greatest films, Phantom of the Opera, was very, very influenced by the soundtrack because, of course, it was from the silent era. And you were telling me at one point that you are involved now in a very anticipated project about the soundtrack from that film. You want to tell me a little bit about that?
Well, years ago, a friend of mine did a little small concert up in Connecticut, Cortland Hall. He had Witch's Dungeon Museum, and we had a little presentation. And he put together score, small little orchestra, and they played the Phantom. And I thought, oh, and everybody loved it, and I did too. And I thought, and I'd seen similar versions of different types of music. It was put together by Drake University, but it was for the 29 version, which was different from the original. And a gentleman at that show gave me a piano score, the original score from 1925 from the Phantom. So I was, oh, cool. And it had all these cues in it. And then I had also collected, I can't quite remember, but there was a musical cue sheet, which was combinations of different compositions. And for different themes of the Phantom, let's say there was like three main themes. There was what was called the Phantom theme, and that was a piece called Prelude to a Mystery Drama, and it was written by a man named Barron way back in the 20s. So that's how they would do mood music, and they would mix it after the film. You know, they didn't have the score going along with the movie while they were making it. They would see it and then they would write it, and it would in the Phantom there was 57 original cues, so there was 57 music changes in that original version. And then you had to track down each and every different track. Now some of them repeated, so that was cool. You could eliminate, let's say, 20 of them, but all the other 37 you had to go find the different music sheets. Well, they were written in the 1918s through up to about 1925 because they had to pull from music they were doing. So that's kind of how it started, and I wanted to do the original. So I went to the Palm Springs Film Festival, and it was really growing at that time. I think it was 1999. And I said, would you be interested in doing a special event, because I know they do one historical project at each film festival. And he said yes. I, oh, okay. So I started compiling all of the music, and I had private donations, Chicago Public Library. I went all over. I went anywhere and everywhere I could search for music. And mind you, I don't know anything about music. Nothing. I can't read a note. I can't, but I'm really good at history, and I'm really good at researching. And if I'm on something like that, I'm like a dog on a bone. I'm like, hey, man, I got more music. I found more music. So I'm getting cellos, first violin, second violins. I always had the piano, because if you have the piano, you can kind of orchestrate off of that. But I started finding all the individual parts. So as we got ready for the show, we played most of the original score from the original film, probably about 70%, maybe 75% was original, the way it was composed to be. We had to repeat some other we couldn't find. But after that, I continued to try to search so I could almost replicate it. And I pretty much have now. I've completed. There's a lot more ability to do research now. There's some online things you can find music. You couldn't do that. You had to find somebody that might have that old music. But it was really fun. People loved it. And I thought, I'm going to do it again, because, the goal was to do it on some special anniversary. And then, so the music, so secondarily, there was that cue sheet, and then there was the original piano score. So I took that to the Egyptian Theater in Hollywood, and I had also had first violin to it, so they matched perfectly. So I hired a pianist and violinist to play the original score with the 25 version. People were blown away because it was so clean, it was so different. It just, the sound of the violin and just the melodies, kind of went with the movie. And so they sold out. It was at another film festival, and I did a matinee, so we had to clear out quick afterwards. But anyway, it just has kept going. And in the meantime, going back to the first one, the local news report said, "Hey, that was really good. It was better than I thought it was going to be." He was kind of wanting to critique it, but he really enjoyed the show. And he goes, "Are you going to do the Hunchback? What about that?" So that started me on a whole nother track. So since I'd been through it once, I kind of knew the same areas to search first where I could knock down a lot of things, which I did know. So we've done that. So I'm hoping, and now that I put it together, that we're developing a project now. I'm in negotiations with Waxworks Records,
Wonderful.
and hoping to do the original score and do a 100th anniversary of it. So we're taking, I can't say too much more, but it's in the works. We're pretty excited about it, and have an orchestra come. I don't know if we can put it all on a record. What I didn't realize is the music's like an hour and 45 minutes, and I think you can only put like what 30, 40
like
minutes,
20,
maybe
20,
at max.
22.
So it'd have to be a double album, yeah. And so we might do a version of that, and then maybe eventually do, because it's expensive, to get an orchestra and rehearse and do all of that. So we're putting the numbers together, and then we have a couple of other guys that are more musicians that have done this and scored films. And so yeah, I'm excited about that. I'm hoping, keeping my fingers crossed, we can do the Hunchback next year, and then follow it up in 25 with the Phantom on the 100th.
That would be amazing. That would be
amazing. I've learned so much about music. I may not be able to read it, but I guess I just gained a much deeper appreciation for what it does and what the instruments are all doing. And like you said earlier, what a track does for a film, really does make you the difference. No doubt. Even going back to the Wolfman, the Hans Salter music and the Frank Skinner, the whole Universal, man, that was some good music background. There was a lot of really talented people that worked on those films.
So one of the things that you were telling me about when we met last, that you've been working on a book about your whole family's history for the longest time. Has that, how close are you to coming to fruition on that, or is it finished, or where are you at on that?
Yes, I've been the long-awaited book. I think somebody said, "Hey, you had brown hair when you first started that thing." I said,
Awesome.
I've learned so much about my family. I think it has to find its own time. I'm hoping to put it out next year. I'm really basically done. I'm in the editing side, and then I'm having some people look at the way I did it, because it's very different. I kept along my grandfather actually started it in the 60s. He announced it on Johnny Carson in 1969. That's what he was working on, but his health was failing, and he developed all kinds of other projects besides the book, but it was titled A Century of Cheneys. So I'm keeping that, and I'm using all of the things that he used. He was doing short comments about different characters of his mom, dad, and himself. And the Century of Chaney was basically their combined careers. My great grandmother's 10 years on stage, Chaney Sr.'s 11 years, and 20 some odd years. And then my grandfather, of course, he was 40 years. He was a little bit short. So I think with House of the Wolfman, Sean, I finished it. I got to that century. So so anyway, that's what the book is. And it's more of a picture book with short comments. And then what I've added is all the historical research and background, and my grandfather didn't do it chronologically. It jumped back and forth and here and there. And he showed it around. He wanted more information, other than just the things he wrote about. He wrote about the Phantom, the Hunchback, some short things on the Penalty, on the Wolfman, his bread and butter, which he called of Mice and Men, and his Lenny character. Actually, I have it here. I've been working on it. This was his original.
Oh, wow.
So, here's how it is. It's pretty thick. I've got 300 and some odd pages. So, I cover the background of the family and the deafness, because I think it's such an integral part of Lon Sr. and my family's careers,
Right.
I felt very important, because that was his roots. And then I jump into a stage career. And I think that's where I've done the most extensive research on Lon Chaney's stage career. I mean, what I've discovered and researched for years and years, and I still find stuff all the time. It's like, I'm almost thinking it's like gold mining, you know, you do it forever and you find one little nugget and you go, oh yeah, you get all excited and it gets you,
Right.
keeps you going to the next one. But I hope next year I'm going to publish it. And then I end it kind of I think there's 12 chapters. I have the foundation, his early years. So we have a lot of family photographs that have never been seen before. So it's really about that, and historically how, and chronologically, and then how his development. And then there's comments from the family members, and I kind of cover the career, and then I do a little wrap up at the end, you know, and with a time log of when these films were coming out or when the stage plays were playing, where he played. So it's kind of a history book as well. But my grandfather's hope was open it anywhere. And we hope you find something you like or answered a question you might have had. I want you to enjoy it. It's about entertaining. And I think more than me trying to write, the pictures kind of tell a lot of the stories. And I think the reason I probably have kept on that, I may be wrong, I may be right, but I'm kind of storyboarding a film, because that's always been my goal, to do a film on Lon Chaney.
Oh, okay, that's great.
That is my absolute goal. When I started this business, when we moved my grandfather, I knew that was my purpose too. I haven't accomplished it yet, but I've gotten close a couple of times, and I won't give up until I just can't try anymore. So,
well, I mean, through Chaney Entertainment, you've been doing a fabulous job of keeping the family's legacy alive. There's some really great things that you've been putting out. I mean, I'm looking in the background where you're sitting, and I see that one poster that I bought from you the last time.
That's right.
I love that image and a lot of the stuff you're doing. What if anything, can you tell us about is coming down the pipeline from Chaney Entertainment?
I've done a few deals with NECA. They did a really nice job. We had some new things come out with Fright Rags. I have a really, wonderful list of licensees that really enjoy doing the likeness. So it's kind of a dual license with Universal and us. But then they have that opportunity to put the real thing. And I think the numbers that they do, because we get a royalty off of those sales, and I see the numbers they do. And, they're doing good. People still love that, both the generic type too. It's just that reminder of, I don't know what it is, what the monsters have this grip on people that have held for 100 years, really, because right. Phantom is 1925. We're coming up on 100 years, but people have loved horror films, love monsters. And, sometimes I go, God, my grandfather only knew, how much loved he was, because I think, when he was older and sicker, and people just kind of forgot about him, and then he didn't want to do an interview. Actually, Forey Ackerman printed it in Famous Monsters that he was sick, and he didn't want him to, but he did anyway. And he got this huge amount of fan mail, and it really cheered him up, so he knew he was still loved, and that was good for me, because I can look back on it and see letters that kids sent to him. Now there are some of them are artists now working in the business, or were inspired by his performances, and it's really cool to see. And I hear that a lot. I wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't for your family. Like when I go to the shows, it's always quite a compliment. They look around, they see all the horror, including the new, and what the genesis of it all. And they say, God, these things wouldn't exist if it wasn't for your family. And I'm pretty proud and honored about that. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
As well you should be. As well you should be. Well, we've covered a lot, and I just wanted to say thank you for joining us today and giving us a peek into the wonderful lives of your whole family. That's just really appreciated. And I wish you the best of luck with the future projects, and I can't wait to see some of those things come to fruition. It's going to be great. That's it for another edition of Louder with Ace. I want to say thank you to our guest, Ron Chaney, and for his time and the wonderful stories about his great-granddad and his granddad. Thanks to my co-host, Sean, and thanks to all of you for your continued support. We're always looking for feedback. You can send us emails at louderwithace@gmail.com or leave comments in whatever platform you're enjoying this podcast on. We love to hear from you and any feedback that you have. And we also are over on the Patreon platform where we do an after hours kind of thing where we talk about some of the other things that go on. So maybe go check us out there, patreon.com/louderwithace. And until next time, stay safe.